15th, 2019. And, excuse me, as required by open meeting law, I'm hereby informing you that this, excuse me, the town will be video and audio taping as well as live broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone in the audience who plans to video or audio tape this meeting must notify the chairman prior to the start of the meeting. Earlier this evening, we started an executive session to approve the executive session minutes. We approved items 1 and 2 from 3/4/19 and 4/1/19, and we are holding the minutes from 4/8/19. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is there anybody for a weekly briefing?
Oh, no.
Oh, what?
You should see the other guy.
Chris hit me.
We're going to be brief.
Are you supposed to be back yet?
Not yet, so I'm not really here. So thank you, Carolyn Carey, Community Center Director, and Erica Strezpeck from the Cultural Center. We just wanted to make sure that the town knew about some really exciting events coming up for Art Week, which starts April 26th through May 5th. This year we're expanding and we're working with the Community Center, Monomoy Regional High School, Brooks Free Library, and of course the Cultural Center itself. We have partners with the Cape Verdean organization, Cranberry Festival, a lot of the artists right inside of the Cultural Center. We have a tentative schedule that we passed out that we're just finishing up some of the really exciting highlights for. But I am here, Erica can talk more. I will say I have been out and Erica has done, and Brian have done so much work. They're incredible. But I'm here to ask if you would consider kindly, part of the Art Week is Light Up the Night, and last year we were featured with the Zakem Bridge, and it was really exciting. And this year we have a partner. Those of you who know on Forest Street, you used to be able to go by and see the reindeer lit up. Well, Bob Doan has agreed to help us light up the Cultural Center. So we are hoping that between the hours of 7 and 10 p.m., we could make that one-way coming in from South Street so that people can stop and enjoy the musical display that will be up. Tune into their radio. There is one exception. We have a nice concert that the Cranberry Festival is doing on Saturday. So that will be a two-way traffic that night. And we have worked with the police, and so I just wanted to let people know and see if anybody had any concerns about that. But this was something that we're excited about, and the people running it are so excited. I don't want to give too much away, but you're not going to want to miss it. It's really, really exciting. And the Highway Department has helped us as well. Bob, Erica, you have little pens in front of you. People who come will be getting free giveaways. It's exciting. None of that was paid for with town money. Those were all donated.
Even more exciting.
It is more exciting. So I'll let Erica take over because but that is our request, that we can maybe do that to help with traffic.
Okay.
So the Light the Night event is really exciting. If you go on the map this year on the artweek.org, ma.org, the Harwich Cultural Center is the only event that's registered on that map.
Woohoo!
Settle down, Carolyn.
Keep the right hand down.
Art Week is really excited about what we shared with them, about what they're doing, and they're looking to put some press together for that, as well as our Seaside Marketplace kickoff on Friday the 3rd, which is another thing we're here to talk about. But we do have Senator Sear joining us. Sue Sullivan from the Bach Center will be coming. Tina Games from the Harwich Cultural Council. So
And we're publicly inviting you and all of the selectmen, certainly all of the town, but we're hoping someone from the board would be able to come, and maybe the town administrator to help us kick that off. They're excited
rain or
about
shine.
this.
Rain or shine.
Rain or shine.
We have umbrellas.
So that's very exciting. The Cape Cod Life, I didn't highlight it, but some of our registered early events, the Labyrinth Group was able to get featured in Cape Cod Life. This is the April edition. And again, expanding our partnership, our bird carver, Paul Phillips, who is with the Crowell Barn, is also listed in here. So that's really exciting, again, for Harwich. Our Channel 5 Eye Opener promotion, many of you were able to come out for that. So that will be airing on Thursday the 2nd. So sometime between 5:13 and 6:13 in the morning, but we will be posting those fun videos online for those of you who are not up at 5:13 in the morning. So
But you all should be.
yes. But again, this is a two-sided flyer to show how we've taken Art Week, not just from the cultural center, but we're including other entities in town, community center, the high school, and of course Brooks Free Library. So we have great things ahead for this year, but we're really looking forward to how exciting next year can be. So
It's incredibly exciting. It's really well put together. A lot of different pieces. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Or do you need confirmation from us this evening in terms of your light and your
That would be
request?
great. Just, we did speak with the Deputy Chief Considine, and he agreed and thought that would be the best route, so we're following his advice, just so you know. And Sean Libby as well was involved in the conversations.
Thank you. You want to give us consensus from the board tonight?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd like to move that, at the recommendation of staff, that we approve the one-way street for the festivities on what date again?
April 26th through May 5th with the one exception, and that will all be posted on the sign boards.
That's too
and-
long for a motion.
Okay, April 26th through May 5th.
As recommended.
Thank you.
I'm all for it, and I don't have a problem with a consensus, but taking an action that's not on the agenda is something we normally don't do,
No, that's true, yeah.
and against state law. So we could officially vote it next week, but this week, we could give a head
Yeah,
nod.
yeah.
Sorry,
So-
that was
What-
totally my fault. I
No.
didn't think I was going to be able to be here.
Because
My
maybe
fault.
we could have a recommendation from Deputy Chief Considine and
Yeah.
put that on the agenda
Yeah,
and just
no.
approve that
Withdraw the
formally.
motion.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's
I
fine.
wanna
I
know
just
what
wanted you to
music.
have a consensus in terms of if anyone had an issue. We don't
Definitely
have
your
an
fault,
issue,
really.
so we'll officially put it on the agenda.
Appreciate it. I apologize, my fault.
No, no, thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else for weekly briefing? Anybody for public comments and announcements?
Good evening, Cindy Williams, Executive Director of the Harwich Chamber. Just want to let everyone know we still have tickets for the Toast of Harwich, which is next Friday, April 26th, 6 to 10 at the Wachusett. They're available on our website as well as at the Chamber. Wonderful restaurants as well as great wine, beer, and bourbon tasting this year, and wonderful silent auctions. So it's a great way to kick off the season and showcase Harwich.
Thank you, Cindy.
Hi, my name is Pat Birchie. I'm from the Alzheimer's Family Support Center, which is headquartered in Brewster, but has support groups all over the Cape. And I'm here for two reasons. One, I want to make sure everybody's aware of this treasure that we have on Cape Cod, which offers free support for families dealing with dementia. They just started 3 years ago, and in that time, we've gone from 2 support groups to 48. Every town has a place where you can go if you're a caregiver, and you can bring your person who has cognitive impairment, and you both have meetings. So you have an activity for the person with cognitive impairment, you have a support group for the person who's the caregiver. And they saved my life when my husband was diagnosed 6 years ago. But so 2 things. I wanted to hand out flyers about us. Is that allowed? Okay. Sure. In case you're not familiar with us, and there's more downstairs. Do you want these, or do you have?
Leave them on the table and we can grab them.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the thing I want to talk about is that we exist, and we would like anybody who has any issues with cognitive impairment to call us and join the support groups or come to some of the activities. But we have a big walk on May 11th at Brooks Park in Harwich. It's the Dave Burtwell Memorial Walk for Alzheimer's, and I don't know if everyone knows Barbara Ann Burtwell Foley, whose Dave was a resident of Harwich. He passed away in 2006 from Alzheimer's. And Barbara used to run this walk every year, and she's given it over to us to run and also to get the proceeds, because everything we do, we don't charge for. So I wanted to invite everybody to the walk. It's only a 3-mile walk, and you don't have to walk, you can dance. We're going to have a salsa dance instructor who's from the Dennis COA. We're going to have Ed McManus cooking delicious hamburgers.
And the rest of the Cranberry Festival
And the
volunteers.
And just to let you know, if you're not familiar with us, so come to the walk. You don't have to pay. You don't have to bring a team. We just like the community to come out and show support for all these families who are dealing with Alzheimer's. And it's a great way to meet your neighbors because it's here in Harwich. We had 300 people last year, and it was a lousy, rainy day. So hopefully we'll have more. It's a quick walk. But I want to also just mention that the COA we're very involved with the COA here in Harwich, and they have a lot of programs at the COA that we partner with. So we have support groups there. We have a caregiver 6-week program there that's fabulous for somebody who's dealing with dementia. And I'll leave those flyers here. But the Friends of the COA are sponsoring us this year for the walk and a couple of other activities. Brooks Library is going to have a table at the walk. The Friends have helped us by giving us the van to use, and the Sound Dunes donate their time for the music. And this year we're going to have the Monomoy High School girls field hockey team have a team. So I encourage you to come out and walk. You can certainly have a team if you'd like to. I'll leave envelopes on the back. You can do them online, or you can do them the old-fashioned way. But I really appreciate you taking the time and listening, and hope you don't have the need for our services, but if you do, I really hope that you call us and at least have a conversation. We can help you living through this.
Do you want to note your phone number for contact purposes?
Oh, yes. Thank you. The center or mine? The center is,
Whichever way is the best.
okay, 508-896-5170.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Ed?
If I would, as Carolyn said, on the first Saturday of Art Week, Cranberry Festival is hosting a concert, and the festival's music producers in the audience, and if you could say a little bit about the performers, I think it'll be a real fun night for a lot of us.
Must I?
Yes, you must.
I must. Bob Weiser, Music Director for the Harwich Cranberry Festival. Thank you, Mr. McManus. On Saturday night, April 27th, as part of kicking off Art Week for 2019, which, for those not familiar with Art Week, this started out as a little thing 2 or 3 years ago, and it's become a statewide celebration of the local arts in local communities. And the folks with the Cultural Center have put together an amazing collection of events, of which our Saturday night event is one, and kind of at their request. And I have arranged for a band called the Resurrection Folk Project to come from Western Massachusetts to perform in the Cultural Center Auditorium. These are 4 veteran musicians who will be performing the music that those of my vintage, which includes some of you here in the audience and many in the community, will remember from the 60s, the music of Simon and Garfunkel and the Mamas and the Papas and the Byrds and Tom Paxton and Judy Collins and all those kinds of folks. All those songs, Monday, Monday, and Sounds of Silence and all that kind of stuff. This band is outstanding, and they are going to give us a beautiful rendition, including a late 60s light show kind of event in the auditorium at the Cultural Center, and I hope you will join us. Tickets are available on brownpapertickets.com. Look for the Harwich Cranberry Festival page on Brown Paper Tickets if you would like to attend. Mr. McManus, is there anything else I need to say?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Excuse me. Anybody else? Oh, okay.
With the permission of the Select Board, we will be serving beverages of both the alcoholic and non-alcoholic nature, so that this will be a party atmosphere for the late 60s Resurrection Folk Project performance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else for public comments and announcements? Hearing nobody, can we get a motion on the consent agenda?
Sure. Madam Chair, I'd like to present the consent agenda and move adoption of the following items. Minutes, March 11th regular session, March 18th regular session, executive session minutes March 4th, and executive session minutes April 1st. The executive session minutes of April 8th are being held. Items B and C will be held and taken up right after this motion. Approve the 2019 junk dealer license renewals contingent on receipt of renewal application. Accept the resignation of Megan Mayhew as an alternate member of the Board of Appeals.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to take note that the ZBA, the Zoning Board of Appeals, is one of the regulatory boards that is different than the other boards. Their alternate actually can participate in all activities, unlike the Conservation Commission and Planning Board. So and the Board of Health doesn't have any, period. So it's really important to make sure we're fully staffed. If anybody out there in TV land would like to apply, it's an important thing for the town, and we'd love to be able to interview people as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Don. Any further discussion? Motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
Madam Chair, before Mr. Howell takes up item B and C, because I'm the president of the organization, I'm going to recuse myself.
Thank you, Ed.
Just going to do them separately.
Sure.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that we accept the application of the Harwich Cranberry Festival for a one-day liquor license serving beer and wine at their musical performance at the Harwich Cultural Center on April 27th, 2019.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the application for a one-day special liquor license for serving wine and malt beverages at the musical performances of the Harwich Cranberry Festival at the Harwich Cultural Center in the Cranfest Courtyard on July 11th, July 18th, July 25th, August 1st, August 8th, August 25th, and August 22nd.
Second.
It's August 15th and 22nd.
August 15th, I'm sorry.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It can come
Thank you, John.
Did you second that?
He did, yeah. Welcome back, Ed.
We're good.
Okay, excuse me, public hearings and presentations. Report and recommendation of the ad hoc Harwich Port Parking Committee. Do we have?
Madam Chair, members of the board, I am Alexander Donahue. I am the resident member of the ad hoc committee on parking in Harwich Port. You probably have all received in your package the report that was sent in. Just to reiterate what we did do, the committee met about 7 times. We had members of the public, some of whom are here this evening. We had the fire department, police, and the DPW. Were all invited for a conversation relative to this parking issue. We make the following recommendations to the board. The number of the businesses in this community use the Schoolhouse Road parking lot for their employees. A number of them, there's an estimated number of about 30 employees that park their vehicles in this parking lot. The committee is recommending that if we can find some village parking outside the village and can provide a shuttle, it may alleviate some of the problems that happen when we have events downtown. We looked at several locations, including the Cultural Center, Sisson Road, Sapatucket Harbor, property known as the Old Harbor Master's Office, AKA the fire station. The property at 203 Bank Street, which is the Harbor Master's Office, is probably the most viable immediately to be used if you choose to do so. There currently is, there are boats, I should say, up there and have been there most of the season. However, conversation with the harbor master indicates those boats are going to be out, removed by around May 20th, which would open it up. As a quick estimate, there appears to be about 35 parking spaces at the old harbor master's office. Ms. Williams, member of the Chamber of Commerce, determined that, and she's spoken with the business community and trying to get a sense from those folks as to whether they'd like to participate in the shuttle program. The shuttle we had in mind would move the employees from the downtown business area. The shuttle would be set up, and that would have to work out with whomever is going to do the shuttle. At the times of the folks going into work, coming out of work, and there would probably be at least 2 shifts that it would entail. The conservation area, which is located up by the harbor master's office, would be set aside for separate parking so that folks can enjoy the conservation area. We feel as though the parking lot should be lined if you choose to use this location, primarily because it has to have defined parking spaces to alleviate confusion and otherwise parking hazards, as we all know, in parking lots. A funding source would have to be identified relative to the cost. We would like to see, and we recommend, that no parking signs, which are currently on some of the side streets in the community, Pleasant Street being as an example, be continued during the events that are held downtown. The parking hours, which has sparked some interest with regard to the schoolhouse parking lot, we're recommending a 2-hour limit on parking and a suggestion of 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. That time could be adjusted, whatever the board wishes to do. Signage would be necessary on the 28th side of Schoolhouse Road and also on Pleasant. The International P, which is used in most communities, would be the one, the sign that we would recommend, in as much as it is pretty well known by most people who travel at any locations. The TD Bank has participated and allowed the use of their property over the last number of years. And signage might have to be located on Route 28, both east and west on 28 as you enter the community, so it would direct people towards the parking in the village. The recommendation is also that there be no tickets issued, at least during the beginning use of this parking lot, primarily because we want to make it non-punitive. Something could be placed on the windshield to notify the owner of the motor vehicle. This may or may not be implemented this season. It could very well be implemented next season or whatever the board does choose. The RFP for the parking opportunities, the TD Bank partnership was done a few years ago, and it has worked out very well. Perhaps a exploration be done of another RFP for other options in the community. Parking is going to become and has become tighter as a result of limited spaces being removed from downtown that folks, I think, assume is public parking. We had also discussed signage directing folks to Earl Road Beach. I didn't have it in the report, but that was sort of discussed in order to alleviate some of the Bank Street Beach parking overflow. In some time in the future, with the help, of course, from all of you and the state, if money became available for sidewalk between Harwich Port and Sequatucket Harbor, that parking lot down there would become very useful to alleviate some of the heavy traffic parking problems in the community. It'll be viable in the future. The board would recommend that the implementation, if you find necessary, be implemented maybe next year, because what we do feel is going to be needed is an education. The public has to be educated, become familiar with the parking lot, should it be given, if citations are going to be issued sometime in the future at that parking lot. Again, we'd like to see it, at least if it were to go in, whatever it be this season or the following season, be non-punitive until the time which would be located on the sign, people become familiar with it. There is the other lots that are available in the community, again, would be something in the future. With that, that's fairly much, I think I've covered most everything. What I would like to do is turn to Cindy Williams to see if Cindy has anything she would like to add to this.
Thanks, Al. I thought you weren't doing that. I thought Al had covered everything pretty much that we have discussed over the few months that we've been together as a committee. It's very important for people to be educated this year. As Al did preface, there is a building, brand new building that is retail space as well as condominiums. And that was and always has been perceived as public parking. We are going to help in educating people as we continue this process with that. The Chamber always puts out a walking map every year. Part of that walking map that we've redesigned will have locations that are public. We've also, as a committee, been able to secure nighttime parking with Cape Cod 5 and TD Bank. So there are some other things that we've put in place once everything is agreed upon, hopefully tonight. We have spoken with the businesses in town, and we're just awaiting what we're going to do. But we, as the Chamber, sell beach stickers 7 days a week, starting, I think it's June 10th or 11th, and we will be sharing with everyone what the parking new policies will be. We are the first location that they usually stop, other than the community center and town hall, so we will make sure that everyone does have those maps as well. But that's all, unless Al has one more item.
The committee had recommended that if you feel the need, that a ad hoc committee be kept, maybe through the fall, not necessarily the board you have right now, the committee, some other committee, whatever it is of your choosing, because this community is going through some major transitions. The downtown area, very fortunately, we have a lot of folks who are using our downtown area, and it's a good thing. Parking has always been a problem, so this is going to be an ongoing discussion in the future years. Does anybody have any questions for me?
First of all, thank you very much for participating in the committee, and obviously it is a serious need in our town, so we appreciate the time and the energy you and the other committee members and Cindy gave the town. So I think we'll open it up to the board. Any questions from the board?
Good job. That's a tough discussion with the parking. Let me ask you, in terms of the potential bus going from the old fire station, did your committee consider a more extensive bus service, some route around town that would possibly combine not only the employee needs but also the transportation to the beach? So it might be more frequent, make it more user-friendly?
You want to handle that one? The answer is yes. We did discuss that. But I'm going to give it back to Cindy. She's such a helpful person.
This committee really, Larry, what we wanted to do was kind of work on what the schoolhouse parking lot needs were, to kind of look at what we feel is one of the avenues of taking, we're trying to bring business into town, and many of the conversations I had with the businesses, they want that as well, so they know that what we're working on with moving employees to another location, they're all right with it. We just need to figure out how we're going to get them to work. And there are some ways to do that, through carpooling or shuttling if need be.
Yeah, the only reason I bring it up is it might give an opportunity to have more frequent bus circuits. But
The
I think
challenge, of course, this wasn't put into anyone's budget for this year, but certainly there may be things, towards sponsoring or things, other ideas, but we need to first figure out how that's going to happen. So that's why we didn't really go into how to shuttle people to the bus, the beaches and such. It was more the other pieces.
Anything more? Larry? Michael?
No, I'm fine.
So just to start, thank you, Al, and thank the entire committee for the hours that you guys put into this. Certainly a hard job that you did, and great recommendations. The question I had, and it was actually posed by a resident that emailed the board and talked about the 2-hour limit in the municipal parking lot. And I thought he made some great points. How do you wait for lunch, eat lunch, and then frequent the downtown if you only have 2 hours to do it? So did the committee give any thought to 2 hours being the dead set limit, or did you think about people wandering through
There is
Howard's
no
Court?
dead set limit. This was merely a recommendation. We had actually looked into kiosk parking as well. That's a pretty expensive situation that the town would have to get into. We're trying to look and see the least expensive and most cost-effective, at least this time, for the community, because this is like a building block. This is not something that's going to be the end-all and be-all. The 2-hour limit is only during the daytime, between those hours. Now, as a board, you may decide to change those hours from 9 to 4, because the folks who come off the beach, and that's part of the issue too, we all know that, would be coming to dinner. We want to be able to give the business community every leg up they can get during this season, because it's a very short season for all of them. And since many of them do use this parking lot, the 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon would become the dinner time. There would be no issue with regard to a time frame on that. Beyond that, this is a work in progress.
Thank you, Al. One question for Cindy, if I may. Did you spoke to the businesses about this, and what was what were the businesses' concerns, and did they offer to pay for part of this shuttle?
No one at this point has stepped up to pay. They're happy that we've looked into this. One of the comments was, we want patrons, so we will do whatever people decide and follow that. So we are going to look at, once it's voted on, then I'll then go back out to the members and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. These are some things that we can do for sponsorship. You can have a banner on the bus, you can, or whatever, and take it from that point. But, as Al mentioned, we did the 2-hour limit, but it's daytime. 2 hours during the day to visit the stores and to have lunch is probably okay. If we went 3, and we had talked about it at a Harwich Port meeting that I had with the members, we then get into those 3 hours, that's going to still the people that park for the beach and walk down to the beach, that's going to be 3 hours. If you do it 2 hours, you're not going to run up and check your car or, for 2 hours. So that's really where the 2-hour limit came, where we finally said, let's do 2, see what happens. But again, it could be flexible.
Thank you. That's it for now.
Ed?
A couple of questions. In terms of the old firehouse parking lot, had you looked into things like to make it available for, say, employees to use, putting in a bike rack where employees potentially could then park their bike and leave it there overnight? And have some place to lock it, and use it during the day to get into town?
There has been thought given to that. The chamber, I think, currently has a bike rack in their parking lot. I think it's been there for a few years. We have not given great thought with regard to the bikes because of the issue with regard to parking, meaning that if those who do have motor vehicles, and it would be in conjunction with the business owners to help us along in having their employees park somewhere else, that being the harbor master's office. At some point, that could run into some issues, and primarily the concern would be that that parking lot, which is going to have its designated P there as well, the international P, may be used by the general public. As we all know, many people are doing a lot of jogging, a lot of running, and a lot of riding bikes. And the parking lot may wind up having people who visit this community recognize it, take their cars, park it, take the bikes off the back, and everybody heads down to the beach on a bike or through the community. So the issue is, we'd like to see the 30 space or 35 spaces freed up for the employees, but realistically, I'm not sure how that would be able to prevent other people from parking there. Let you work it out.
And then the other question I have is, if you do it, establish a 2-hour limit at the parking lot at the Chamber of Commerce, and there's no fine, what's the enforcement mechanism?
Initially, there'll be no enforcement mechanism.
Okay.
The idea is there is a learning curve on this. And we'd like to have the public, people who come into this community, recognize that this has begun. At some point, there may be enforcement. And Cindy has spoken with the police department regarding this.
So we are in discussions with how that will work, Ed, with the police, and we just need to come up with the right scenario for that. So this year, I keep saying when I've spoken about this, this is the year of educating. It's kind of like the Chinese New Year, Chinese year of the pig, year of the snake, whatever. This is the year of educating in Harwich. We have a lot of things to educate people about, and this parking will be one of the big things that we, it's for the better and the safety for a lot of things.
Well, I have somewhat of an opinion of a lot of folks who are going to say, well, you want me to park here only 2 hours, but you're not going to do anything if I park more, so I'm just going to park more. So.
It hasn't been a definitive answer on that yet. As I mentioned, we're into the discussions with the police. We just started that. We're kind of relying on what's going to happen after our recommendation as well, to then say, okay, well, then we're going to have, I don't know what the solution will be. Who will be the person, putting chalk on the back tire or whatever, They joked in the meeting that I now have a new position as the meter maid. We don't know yet, So we need to figure that piece out with a little help as well. So that's why the discussion started.
Chris?
Just, Madam Chair, I think it's important to make sure that we kind of, I think these concepts are very good concepts, but, to everything in life, there's a process. And, I do think to some degree, I would like to have staff be able to go through some of the elements of this and really just provide form and function. So if the board has a desire to pursue this, I think all these things can be pursued. I don't think there's any issue with that. But just, the first one on the 203 Bank, there is a town meeting vote that, to sell it and to have it used also, the town, obviously, the selectmen have some authority to keep it as parking or to sell part of it to Harwich Conservation Trust. We also do have some kind of agreement, I don't know if it's a lease, I can't remember what it is, with Harwich Conservation Trust to allow them to park. So I know that there is an obligation already on that site. And I do need the harbor master to kind of clear that out so we can be prepped. But I think certainly doing some line painting and experimenting with that for this year is certainly very much doable. Number two, on the no parking signs, that's a police issue, that they do that for different events, and I don't see that as being any real issue. On the parking, in doing the 2 hours, all due respect, I think if you have a law on the books, there is an obligation to enforce. So, I would feel a little uncomfortable about that. We have had some discussions. Eric Beebe has 2 people that monitor different parking lots throughout the town, so we could add that to his enforcement list. On 2 hours, I think that is by, there is a traffic regulation that came out in the 1930s that every town has, and this town's no different. If we're gonna go from free parking and all-day parking free and have it be regulated, it does need to go and have a regulation adopted by the Board of Selectmen. So that is something that would require a process anyway in terms of the education. I think I would at least suggest, I did a lot of parking in the town of Wellesley when I was there. I was actually their parking person, for better or for worse. And sometimes you can accomplish things by having 2-hour spaces and 4-hour spaces. So there are sometimes commingling the concepts and putting up the signage, but there would be a little bit of money potentially that would go into doing the signage. If the town wanted to consider using the parking attendants, we could certainly do that because they're already on staff. Or if we wanted to adopt machines and have some kind of machine ticket parking, I think that's becoming more commonplace. But I think the long and the short on that one is we definitely need to take a little bit of time because that is going to be a regulatory change that has to have a public hearing and so forth. And then the last one, I want to just kind of applaud TD Bank and would encourage others to do it. TD Bank did an agreement with us to expand the parking lot for $1. So there was no formal RFP because basically it was a gift to the town. The town had to spend, I think it was about $30,000 to do the connection to that parking lot and put some fencing up. But, that was a corporate citizen that recognized that their parking needs weren't as great as the parking field they had and worked cooperatively with the town. So we can certainly do an RFP, but I would also kind of say to the business community, it helps everyone to let people park and use all the businesses. And if people want to come forward and do an arrangement with us similar to that, certainly we can do that. We could certainly formally do an RFP, but that kind of implies that there would be money that we would be compensating someone, and we would have to have a budgetary allowance for that.
Thank you, Chris. Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know, I'm grateful for all the work that you folks did, but I'm somewhat ambivalent about the outcome. I'm certain that someone's not going to drop a parcel of land from the sky so that we have more parking. But in my mind, the endeavor was supposed to be to try to balance out the business interests and the residents' interests. So, in that endeavor, the parking was starting to spill out into the streets where the folks who lived there had cars parked all along the way. And not doing any enforcement from this as a suggestion, I agree with that. I mean, it's kind of like if everybody was nice to each other, this would be great. I don't see the world converting to that anytime soon. I would love the board to have one or two of the kiosk vendors come in to talk about what that might look like too. My only problem with this is, first of all, it's more than just it would have to be a bylaw because we'd have to adopt what section of the code that we would be fining them for if we actually got to the point of enforcement. Enforcement doesn't work unless there's a fine associated with it. And that would mean that we'd have to adopt that, for this spot, which we have not yet done. But again, the vibrance of the community is a mixture of the residents and the businesses. Trying to find a harmonious solution to this is kind of difficult, I understand that, but I'm not sure, absent buses and absent enforcement, I'm not sure if this gets us any closer than we were last year to a real solution where people, open up parking spaces. And the reticence of the businesses kind of troubles me too. They should be real happy to get their employees out of that lot because those people are occupying spaces that, this is all about the game of turnover. I mean, let's be honest with it, because if you are seeing people go to the beach, and I do, those people actually aren't paying their fair share to get a sticker to do that, so we don't get the benefit at Rec and Youth of the money for that. And they are ensconced there for like 6 hours, 7 hours. They'll go in the morning and they'll come back later. I've seen the whole caravan of them walking down with floats on their heads. Those people aren't coming back periodically, which means there's no turnover. And basically, we've got to come up with a way to manufacture turnover or we're going to have the same problem again. People are going to be parking in the streets and residents are going to be angry and businesses are going to be saying, but we need those people. We're no further along.
So if I may, Madam Chair, reply to both Don and Mr. Clark's statements. So we have reached out to kiosk companies, and just for one, with the software and everything else, it's about $15,000. That's just to put it in. So I have all of that data. So if we do get to that stage in this process somewhere down the line, certainly we can reach out to them. In regards to, I lost my train of thought. TD Bank, and so part of the meetings that we had and some of the people that did come, some of the residents that came to our meetings, one gentleman asked about shared parking. So what I had done was reached out to both the banks, TD Bank and Cape Cod 5, to see about the nighttime. Because after that 4 o'clock time, or 5 o'clock when they close, there is bank parking available. Other than on a Wednesday night, of course, when Wednesday nights, as we all know, is quite popular. And everyone enjoys themselves, restaurants, businesses, and all the residents as well. So they are agreeing to let that be shared parking, so to speak, without wanting anything or anything else. So we have that piece available. The businesses were thrilled with the ones that did reply. Certainly some of them were not around, but the ones that did do like the idea that we're opening up those spaces for the patrons. And that's why, we were looking what's close by, so it's not going to be, a safety hazard either for the employee if they're walking any distance to work. And the Harbor Masters building, the old Harbor Masters building, was the closest option for that, with the sidewalk on the other side of the road. So we are trying to figure out things, and without knowing what we had for staff available to mark cars and such to, say, yes, we're enforcing it. I reached out to the deputy chief to just say, hey, this is what we're thinking. We're in front of the selectmen on Tuesday. Can we have some conversations on it? There may be that there's someone on a little bike. I don't know yet. That's, again, some of the questions that we didn't have answers for yet.
Thank you, Cindy. Yep. I guess a couple questions I have, and I know that you've indicated that you don't have anybody identified yet of who put the flyers on. But, to the point of this is a building block and we need to go further from there. If we were doing this as an educational thing this summer, since that we're not enforcing it, right? I agree with both of you in the sense of that we're not going to get very far, but we're sending out a message that we're moving towards that. So if we were to do this, sort of non-punitive flyers and could identify somebody to do that, then my question would be, we're not in violation of anything because we haven't adopted a certain action to fine anybody. So there's nothing technically, am I understanding
Yeah,
that
I
correctly?
think, obviously I've been in several different towns and, each town takes a little different approach. I think that here, what makes a lot of sense would be to do kind of an education campaign. So maybe they don't get a formal ticket, but they get a courtesy warning or a courtesy reminder. So we could commence, kind of do that. In terms of the parking, though, I mean, we do have to have the hearing, we do need to formally adopt the hours, so that would have to be done, I mean, there's really no way around that. But, I could certainly talk with Eric Beebe, Recreation, and as he does the enforcement, maybe have those two gentlemen that go around and do the tickets, send out little reminders to people that, we're gonna be enforcing this, in the next season, just to start to get people thinking about it. It's all doable, it's just a matter of, I think if the board's comfortable with going down this road, I'll start to see about the mechanics of actually implementing it.
Yeah, and also, when it comes to the strolls on Wednesday evenings, I mean, we've talked extensively about the school going to the
Yeah.
collaborative. What about those buses? We don't have any identification of what they would be doing, right? So why couldn't they be used? Ed?
Yeah, if we do require a bylaw to put in a 2-hour parking zone and the regulation that goes behind it, then that's clearly something that we're not going to be able to do for this summer. I think probably what would be, in terms of education, worthwhile to do is to do up some fairly large maps of the Harwich Port area, clearly marking where the public parking is, and clearly identifying that certain areas will be moved to 2-hour parking, or the plan is to move it to 2-hour parking in the coming summer, to sort of forewarn people. And in addition to having those maybe at the chamber, and maybe several of them out on Wednesday nights for people to see as they walk by. Then also putting out every now and again, going through the parking lot at the municipal parking lot and putting a flyer on, sort of saying the same thing, to sort of get people ready for the following summer.
I'll turn this over to Ms. Williams because that was discussed. But regarding Mr. Howell's question with regard to parking on the streets, we have had several people come in from Pleasant Street area, and their concern has been the parking, legitimately so. That's a tough nut to crack, primarily because that's a very narrow street. Parking is only authorized on one side of that street now during events. But bear in mind, during the week, there are trucks, lawn services, everything out there. So they're going to be there. They're gone by probably 3 in the afternoon. But there's not too many ways you can prevent the parking on Pleasant Street. The only thing that can be enforced is that one side, and should motorists park in front of driveways for the people who live in this community. But we were fortunate to have a gentleman came in from the Anchorage, I know he's here, and another gentleman from Pleasant Street came in, and they expressed to us their concerns for their neighborhood. We did not find a panacea to solve that problem. Narrow streets, small community, and it's very vibrant. Okay, Cindy has a response.
In regards to Mr. McManus's comment about the map, so that was what I had mentioned earlier. So we as a chamber, do a Harwichport map every year. This year, we're redesigning it because of these challenges and what we want to educate. So everyone that comes into the chamber, our volunteers, who we have 7 days a week, right away, the first thing, other than a beach map, is the walking map. So, and then I also sell the stickers 7 days a week. So I'll have a whole spiel that I'll go into with educating them and pointing out where they can park and where, you know, what we've set up for everyone, so it does work.
Thank you, Cindy. Any other questions from the board?
It seems to me that they have a good proposal, and Chris has some observations. It'd be good to have town administrator come back as agenda item and what's the next step moving us forward? Because it's clear we need to start doing something, and this may be a good place to start.
Thank you. Chris,
Yeah,
let me just let Chris respond to.
I was gonna say, it is a public hearing, so you may want to get input, but
Yeah.
really what I'm kind of looking for from the board is if the consensus is this makes sense, then I'll pursue it. If there's a consensus that 1, 2, and 3 make sense, then I'll pursue it.
Right.
I guess I'm just looking for a little bit of direction in terms of that at the end of the
Yeah,
discussion.
we'll open it up to the public. Anybody else would like to, do you want to add any more to that, Al?
No, I think I've covered pretty much what we had to give.
I did have one follow-up question, sorry, before I go to the audience. In terms of the satellite parking in the evening on Bank Street for workers, I mean, I think we would all want some sort of consensus that the businesses were gonna make sure that those employees had safe transit back to, you know.
Cindy has been out attempting to achieve exactly what you've mentioned. Difficulty is, many of them just are not around right now. And they are only recently, within the last week or so, getting their businesses ready. So, yes, they have to be brought on board. They have no reason not to want to come on, since they also are beneficiaries of that public parking. The only other suggestion I just had given to me by the gentleman back here, which was very good, is he just suggests signage in the parking lot saying no beach parking. It's just another sign, and I know there's we have a curse with regard to putting too many signs out.
So yes, that is a very good comment, but unfortunately, because I also brought it up at one point early on, before we even had this committee. Unfortunately, it's a public parking lot, so we can't say you can't park here for beach. But what I did last year, before we started all this with our volunteers, was just letting them know, if anyone comes in, please don't tell them that, yes, they can park here for the beach, because people are so used to it. So we just made other suggestions for them, you know, told them how wonderful the other beaches were and other things to kind of sway them and tell them what hours you could go to Bank Street, which tends to be the one beach that everyone wants to get to, and there are limited spots. So thank you for the comment about the put no beach sign parking up, but we can't because of it being a public lot.
Thank you for the clarification, Cindy. Anybody from the audience would like to make a further comment?
I don't know how you can enforce it, that's the only issue.
If you want to make a comment, you come up to the podium and just identify
I
yourself.
relinquish the podium.
Thank you.
Someone says, you know, they have the blow-up thing for the beach.
Hi, Dave Burke from Bank Street. To Chris's point, where the town voted to sell the property.
Correct.
So instead of selling the property and getting the money from that and then putting it back on the tax rolls, we're building a parking lot that's probably not going to bring us in any money. Every week, I watch the program here, and we're strapped for money, we don't want to hit the taxpayers, and here we're taking a valuable piece of property off the tax roll for a parking lot. Something to think about.
Go ahead, Ed.
As I remember, the motion was to sell it for conservation purposes, which is not going to bring a whole lot on the tax roll.
Yeah, Chris?
Well, I think two things, just to be accurate, that town meeting did vote that to sell it off. There was definitely, the mood of the meeting was absolutely to have it for conservation purposes. But what town meeting does, it then gives the selectmen the authority to design how you want to have that process of being sold off done.
Yeah.
So I think we did do at one point a draft RFP. We need to revisit that once the harbor master has that vacated. I think it makes more sense to revisit it at that point. But there is certainly some discretion for the selectmen in terms of how the town accomplishes that.
Right, and for further clarification, we did also talk about, several, probably 2, 3 years ago now, about, whether or not that was something we could sell off for lots. But to the point of having Coldbrook going on, the last thing we want to do is bring in more residential settings where we can contribute to the water issue that we already are trying to correct, so. Go ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Bob Pianadosi, Harwichport. Very complex issue. We've lived on Bank Street since 1975. We have seen the growth of the downtown area, and some of it, most of it, we really appreciate. There are some parts of it that we don't, that sometimes get overlooked. Traffic. I don't know if this committee has looked at the traffic studies on Bank Street as they put this idea or concept in play to talk about putting a parking lot. We need a balanced conversation about how we're going to do this. Obviously, a lot of work was done, and I certainly appreciate much of that effort, but I think it was clearly unbalanced. You have the business community created a team. You have eliminated any conversation. I personally applied for that committee, called the town, called your office, and then personally went to your office to find out whether I'd be admitted to that particular committee. Was never called, was never contacted. So you've eliminated at least one person on Bank Street who has a vested interest in our property values, that you're putting a parking lot in a residential area. I understand that this is, that this is going to not make some people feel comfortable on the business side, but it seems deliberate, and I hate to use that word, but it seems deliberate that me in particular, were not allowed on that particular committee. And I understand there's another person that I do not know was also asked to be on that committee and was refused or not given that opportunity. So if you want to have a balanced conversation about changing and putting parking on Bank Street and changing the dynamic, you really have to have some residents involved in this conversation. And I would also ask that if this continues, that we, the residents on Bank Street, see the data, what data was compiled, how the decision was arrived at, and what other opportunities there might be to correct this parking problem. If you live on Bank Street, and with the growth of the downtown, and all the restaurants now having full licenses, that Bank Street turns into a jetway at 11 o'clock at night. And the debris that comes off the road, that comes out of the cars, and the cigarette butts, and all the stuff that we have to deal with. And this just encourages it. So I think if you want to continue this conversation about putting a parking lot in a residential area, I think you need to stop, not proceed, get more information, get more input from people who are impacted by this. You have clearly, this is a lopsided conversation. And I love the community, the business community. I like what's, the people are down there, the restaurants. I'm like a cheerleader for those folks. But this has to be on balance for how this impacts the residential area. These homes that have been here, we've been there since 1975, and we plan to stay. But there has to be some recognition of the residents that live here year after year and day after day. Thank you.
Don?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, I made my point initially that I'm ambivalent about the outcome, but having said that, you folks need to understand this wasn't designed to be a convention. It was designed to be an orderly committee. The committee charge was done at a posted meeting. There were permanent resident representation. There was business representation. There was. And there was an ex officio position for the town planner, and there was one for the Chamber of Commerce Executive Director. Those meetings that transpired were all done publicly too. I'm not saying we're going to act on this, but to put it out to the public that somehow or another you had no seat at the table, that you didn't know where any of the meetings that were publicly posted were, and this has been going on for months, but you had no idea and had no input whatsoever, is not true. The fact of the matter is that nothing could have been done without it being a posted meeting. We're here trying to grapple with whether we accept some or all of these proposals, but please don't get to the point where you feel like you're not being listened to. The fact that this committee even exists was because you are being listened to.
Thank you, Don. Evening.
Dr. Stan Moody, 317 Bank Street. And this is really an important matter for the residential area of Bank Street. It's a neighborhood. It is residential. It doesn't become business until the corner, as far as I know, to the corner of Main Street. So it's very important that you open this up for discussion with the Bank Street residents. There's a lot of people here that are concerned about it. And I think they should be brought into the conversation. So I test what you've said, and I think it is important. So I hope that all this is considered. I personally feel that there's plenty of parking that's been created downtown that needs to be looked at first. I mean, I know the condominium building is there. There's a lot of parking in back there. I don't know if that's available or not to us. I don't know what that situation is. But I like the new parking lot down at the Sakatucket Harbor. It's a nice area. It needs to be looked at for this purpose. So that's just my feeling, and anybody else wants to,
Thank you. We appreciate the comments, and it's important that people understand, as Don has indicated, these were publicly posted meetings, and we are having this conversation because we are listening to the residents, to the businesses. The other thing I do want to point out is that Bank Street lot has been in municipal use for several years. It was a fire station, it's been a harbor master station, in the sense that we're going to town meeting in terms of how we're going to...
Conservation Trust.
Right, conservation. And, there's been multiple uses of it, so it's not as if we're suddenly introducing a lot that's never been used for municipal purposes. I just want to... excuse me, if you want to speak, you have to go up to the podium and identify yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. I live at 204 Bank Street, my wife and I do, and I don't think anybody would be more impacted by this than the two of us, by the parking and shuttle situation that will be taking place at the Harbor Master. I'm not sure what consideration was given to the other proposed possibilities for locations, but it seems like this is already a done deal. Am I correct? That the decision to use the Harbor Master is the choice of the three?
These are recommendations by the committee.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to clarify that, because sitting out on my front porch last summer during the work that was going on with all the trucks coming and going, it's not a very enjoyable time sitting on my front porch trying to enjoy the summer day, just to clarify that. Also, I think some serious consideration needs to be given to the other possible locations, as far as, because not a lot of talk has been given tonight about the other locations, so I just wanted to say that.
Go ahead, Ed.
Can you give us an idea of what other locations?
I thought that there was a location on Sisson Road, the arts, am I wrong? The Cultural Center on Sisson Road, and I believe there was also the area down on off Sakatucket Harbor. Thank you. So.
Did you want to follow up?
No, I just
I mean, every time,
wanted to know what
every time that there's an event that goes on that they do utilize that area for parking, it's usually just a one-day event, so we kind of suck it up and deal with it. But it's not that great of an experience from a resident's point of view.
Thank you for your comments. Chris?
Just, Madam Chair, on that, it has come up a couple times, and just to remind folks that the town meeting did appropriate $250,000 towards building a sidewalk system in which to connect Saquatucket Harbor in the parking field to Harwich Port. And, you know, this is a time where you probably want to call your legislators. It's not our roadway, it's a state roadway. And we have pleaded and begged with the state to please put in a sidewalk to make a safe way to traverse between the two, so we could take advantage of that parking lot and help Saquatucket and help Harwich Port and take some of the pressure off. And I hate to say it, it's more Mass DOT, but it's not being heard. So, you know, it's not our road, and there's limited what the board can do, and we have made efforts to try to push them, and gotten some reaction, but just not as much as I would like to get the project done.
Thank you, Chris.
Hi, I'm Stephanie O'Neill. I live on Bank Street. And the only point I want to make is that since 39, they created the roundabout at 39, trucks don't go down 39 to 137 anymore, or down to, say, where the harbor is, the new harbor. They come down Bank Street to the point where I can be out in the yard and I can't even hear the person next to me for this tractor trailers going down the road. So that's one thing. The other thing is if there is a shuttle that is coming up 3 times a day, is what I read in the thing that came to me. So I'm assuming it's 6 times a day because it's back and forth, that there is enough traffic there already that a shuttle coming in and out, waiting and going down, back down Bank Street, doesn't cover waitresses and waiters that get out of their job at 2 o'clock in the morning and who walk back up to Bank Street, back up to the harbor master's office. The Bank Street sidewalk is hardly a sidewalk, it's a shoulder. So that's not safe either. So I would urge you to consider all these different things before you make a decision to set up a shuttle and have it go outside of downtown. Even if they park downtown, you'll have more control over it than you will if you have it up Bank Street. And that's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Had a little speech planned, but seems like everybody beat me to all the points. The only thing that I can add...
Excuse me, you just have to identify yourself,
Oh,
please.
Nancy Townsend Best, 208 Bank Street.
Thank you.
We would be looking right at the parking lot. Give you an idea of our location. The only thing I can add to this whole problem, we've addressed people parking there as employees, and yes, it doesn't work for people that get out at 2 o'clock in the morning. They're not going to walk back to the parking lot. I hope they're not. And you know, we've already said about beachgoers, like, no, the beachgoers aren't going to park in that parking lot, but maybe they are. And that causes problems with traffic. Could be foot traffic up and down Bank Street and whatnot. Dangerous, extremely dangerous. There are crossroads on Bank Street that have accidents all the time because they're blind coming out. They hit cars. And what about all these people coming down now? That is just not a good situation. The only thing I want to add to what everybody has said, and I do think that it's a great start, but it's a Band-Aid on a gaping wound, and we have to think long-term. The thing is that there are other communities here, Chatham, Dennisport. I bet you that they have gone through the same kind of meeting, like what do we do with our parking? How do we get people attracted to our towns and make it pleasurable for them to come to the town? Adequate parking, easy. It's a great experience. We want to come back here. But we also want to expand the tourist industry, not just in Harwich. We have an obligation all up and down Route 28. Shoppers, lots of great beaches, and it does start Chatham all the way to Dennisport. Why don't we kind of ask these towns, you know, what their ideas are? Are they having a problem? Can we coordinate somehow? And also to look at the any tourist town, up and down the eastern coast of the United States. There's lots of towns in Maine, and how did they solve their problems? Let's find out how they solve their problems, or have they solved their problems, and then come back with some concrete things that we can decide on. Right now, it is just a Band-Aid.
Thank you. I don't think you'll find anybody on the board that doesn't, agree with you in the sense that we understand it's a bigger problem. We understand that this is the beginning of us trying to address this problem. To Cindy's point, we're at a point where the summer's around the corner. We're trying to address things whatever way we can to try to improve the situation. We all know that this is a long-term effort. In any way we can look at shuttle buses, other types of properties, certainly it's a problem in every town. Chatham just bought a property for almost $2 million downtown, but that was because they were lucky to be able to raise the funds to do so. So, we understand it's a larger issue. It's not going to be resolved this evening. This was the beginning of having a committee to address what we all know to be a significant issue for people, the businesses, the residents, and the workers. So we hope that you'll understand that we all understand that. We're working towards a solution. It's not going to be instantaneous.
Madam Chair, if I can just address a couple of the comments that have come up. So there is someone that is interested that hasn't put anything forward to me yet about possibly helping with that. So again, the committee had our meetings, as Mr. Howell and Mr. McManus mentioned, are public. We had two of the residents, the only two residents, matter of fact, but they did give us some ideas that we did look at, and one that came out of it that we have recommended is working with the two local banks for that nighttime. We mentioned the harbor master because that was the closest thing. We're trying to think of close proximity, safety, but also having these two banks, the nighttime parking, maybe that can be for the late night restaurant workers. We're not saying that it has to be the harbor master's building for the nighttime. The daytime, what we're trying to help with is that beach parking that Mr. Howell alluded to that happens in the schoolhouse parking lot. So again, we were so happy to have the two gentlemen that did come and, during our meetings and give some suggestions. We did look at all of that. Again, as everyone has said, it's not going to happen overnight, but we are trying to help come up with some ideas. And certainly we would love to look at other ideas if there are any. The parking lot's not going to happen, fall out of the sky. But there are some things that we can try to do. And it is educating and trying to be what everyone needs, too. Someone just mentioned, what do the other towns do? Well, this gentleman that has approached me does help with that, and I'm waiting to see what he can come up with, if anything. So, one of the local businesses did come up with an idea for the shuttles, but again, there's not any money that's allotted for this, so we're trying to be creative, but also, as the chamber, who was one of the business representatives for the committee, we're a nonprofit, so we don't have a budget that we can pay for it. But certainly, as we get creative with other things that we go for sponsorships, we're going to try to work with that as well. So again, we're trying, everyone on that committee tried to help and come up with some ideas, and look at that crystal ball. So again, if everyone can just all embrace, and we're all working together for the same thing. And we just want to make sure that everyone does understand that we did have residents come to the meetings. And if you have other things, certainly we want to keep this going.
Thank you, Cindy. We appreciate the clarification.
I imagine, I guess they did have meetings, and I didn't attend. But I was very patient as I waited to hear from the committee or whoever was in charge of putting that particular ad hoc committee together. Didn't have the courtesy to call me to tell me whether I was on or off after two requests. So when we talk about, we had meetings, I think that what would have been appropriate is they had two vacancies on that committee, as I understand. No?
I don't believe so.
I understood there were two vacancies. No? Yes? No? It's in the minutes. Okay. So why weren't those vacancies filled with people who volunteered, the things you asked for. You asked for volunteers to step up, and I have other things to do, just like everybody else. And here I am, you know, advocating for a balanced approach and the data. Show us the data, how you arrived at the conclusion to go to the Bank Street property, because this is a data-driven problem. It's cars and people, and how do you move those cars and people appropriately at the right times, so maybe you don't impact a neighborhood and devalue their properties by doing that. So I think it's a data-driven problem, and I'd like to see the data. If I wasn't allowed to be on that particular committee, at least open that information up to everybody.
So, again, I think what we're trying to have a lot of communication here is that we're starting this process. You don't have all sorts of hard data. We don't have
Well, that's how it
RF
starts, though.
Excuse me.
Yes.
So we don't have all this information. We're at the beginning. These are the building blocks of us trying to get to those next steps. I don't think that it's fair to say that anyone's excluding you when there are other members of the public who may want to participate as well. We've just heard.
Well, I'm not trying to take it personally,
Okay,
Madam
so
Chairman. But
I'm just saying that there were public meetings. If you want to find out about something and you're concerned, we do have the website with the public meetings posted.
I think-
Just to be clear, I'm just clarifying for
Yeah.
you that there are public meetings. There is a way to gain access to that information. Nobody is keeping it from you.
Well,
So ultimately, I understand your concern. You would like to have more input. I think what you've heard from tonight is that we're trying to work towards a larger approach. Currently, what we're trying to deal with tonight, this board, is that the summer is almost upon us. And so we're just trying to look at different places and what ways we can alleviate the traffic problem, the parking problem, the safety for workers. You know, I don't think that this is a grand conspiracy, honestly.
Well,
just wanna
I never said it was, but I think there were opportunities, there were 2 vacancies that could have been filled by people in town, in that neighborhood, that would have had, I think, information, additional pieces of information that could have driven this maybe in a little different direction and saved a lot of people. These people are here because they're concerned. You know, they're not, they could have been at home tonight, but they're listening because they're concerned about this particular concept. And when you start talking, well, we'll try this, we'll put a sign out, we'll mark the, that's the camel getting his nose into the tent. Once you start it, then all of a sudden we play catch up. That the train moves down the tracks, and we play catch up to say, we never wanted that, and did you look at every alternative? And so when you say there were meetings, there were opportunities there. You theoretically created opportunities for the public to get involved, but yet did not bring those people forward.
Well, I would also remind you that, and I attended the planning board hearing where we tried to increase parking downtown to try again to alleviate the parking problems on side streets. And we had an outpouring there of telling us why that wasn't appropriate either. So I think this board has been working very diligently trying to identify places in town that can help increase parking, decrease problems for residents. And every single time we go that road, we seem to be hitting a roadblock, no pun intended. So ultimately, we're not in the easiest of positions either. Neither is the committee, and we have to start someplace. I think you would have to agree with that.
I do agree. I think that it's, but I think it was a poor start not to get a larger sampling of folks who are interested in this problem. I sat here when you started talking about it months ago, and you started talking about this particular location, and I saw you taking notes, Madam Chairman, about the traffic on Bank Street.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible, and that's not my data. That's the data from your own police department. So not to take that into consideration and throw this out. Well, let me just correct that and put this out as a possible solution. It's just hard to understand.
Thank you. I would point out as well is that, as much as Bank Street is heavily traveled, and it is, there are many roads in town that are also heavily traveled. I do live right off of Route 39. Trust me, there are trucks going up and down Route 39 and 137 all day long. So nobody is remiss to say that we don't have a traffic problem. I think every town does, so. Good evening.
Mary Moody, and I'm at 317 Bank Street, and I'm definitely out of my comfort zone, but I wanted to just make a couple of points. One is, my other life, 15 years ago, we lived in Newport, Rhode Island. And Newport, Rhode Island is a similar situation as yours. It's lots of stores, no parking. They finally resolved their parking problem by shuttling people, but they shuttled them to the next town, to Middletown, which is plenty of parking. And it may be an 8-minute ride instead of a 2-minute ride, and you certainly can't walk downtown, but it still facilitates the people going downtown. And so I'm looking at the other options that they sort of presented. One of them, the Cultural Center, which is a school, which had plenty of parking. Certainly the little place on Bank Street, Holy Trinity Church, has tons of parking that's never used after 5 o'clock. Has anyone thought about talking to them? But anyway, my point is, you can have a loop that would run during that time and cover all of those bases, drop everyone off, and pick people up much more often. The second thing I wanted to say is that I live on 317 Bank Street, which is right at the top of the hill. And if anyone ever chooses to do an impact study on the number of emergency vehicles, construction vehicles, school buses, and buses that compete with the pedestrian traffic that's trying to walk from, or bike traffic that's trying to get from the bike path to the beach. When I moved here 15 years ago, we have 15 grandchildren, and they've grown up on Bank Street over the summer. We were able to walk to the beach with strollers for multiple children and trikes for multiple children. Now, because of the pathway that is so poorly supervised at the bottom of Bank Street, we drive. We can't, they can't walk when we don't feel safe to let them walk or bike there. And finally, I just want to say that over the last 5 years, 4 different times, our mailbox, which is recessed and sits up on a hill, has been taken out of commission by a car speeding. We didn't see it, so we just replaced the mailbox. But the speeding and the traffic in a residential area shouldn't be impacted the way it will be if you add 35 car parks, multiple bus runs, and traffic. I'm happy to have it being used as a place to store boats or have the, harbor master or utility vehicles. That's no problem. But you're talking about an awful lot of traffic on an already heavily trafficked area. So I would like to see an impact study, and I'll be happy to come to a meeting. I have been remiss not being able to get here, but I work all day, so I'm sorry about that, but just send me an email and I'll be there.
Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
comments. I think you identified a couple things that we have also identified as major problems. Our sidewalks, which are a big problem the town faces, and ultimately a safe passage on the roads. Both of them are easily identified by the board.
Hi, Trish Kennedy. My husband and I live at 238 Bank Street. We bought our property in 1985. One issue that Mrs. Moody just brought up is something that I've been addressing with the Harwich PD for 20 years at least, is the speed. And I've spoken with Aram over the years. They've put the speed thing, but they put it up at the end of Long Road. By the time you go down that hill and you get to where we are at 238 Bank Street, speed limit's 35. People are going 50, 55, sometimes 60. It's crazy how fast people drive down that street. And when they put that speed thing up, it's always in the worst possible location, is they're not getting an accurate reading of the speed with which people are driving down that street. And that's going to be a huge problem with this parking issue. I just wanted to bring that up. That's something that really is a really important issue that needs to be addressed as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Carla Burke, Bank Street, 200 Bank Street. I have a couple of questions and then some comments, and I'd like to ask some of the questions first because maybe members of the ad hoc committee can answer them. First of all, could they just let the public know tonight, the audience and people who are watching on TV, when the committee meets,
Sure.
day and time? So I don't know if somebody could answer that first, please.
it evaporates after this month.
Cindy, there, Al, thanks.
I'm sorry, I did not hear the question.
When does your committee meet, day and time?
We meet on Tuesdays. Our next meeting and our last meeting is on, I think it's May 3.
And what time?
It's usually at 10:30 a.m.
Okay.
So
Okay, so,
May 3rd is,
let me just
So-
repeat that so the public can hear at home. So it's Tuesdays, the next meeting is 5/3, and what? Fri-
yeah,
Did he say Friday?
that's a Friday.
Tuesday.
Oh, that's not right.
Maybe got my calendar.
The
All right,
first
hold
is,
on.
the first is a
Could be the
Wednesday, so it would be the 7th.
The 7th?
Well, that's the first Tuesday in May, if that's
just
when
look
they're
at it.
meeting.
Yeah, the first Tuesday would be May 7th. Do you know it, Cindy, what the next meeting?
It's been every other Tuesday. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I can't remember if it's April 30th or May 7th, but it has been every other Tuesday during the whole process,
Okay,
and it's at 10:30 in the small meeting room here.
thank you.
You're welcome.
April 30th is the
April
last
30th.
Tuesday.
Okay, I just want to, having heard that, that's great. I want to point out 10:30. I bet most of the people who are here from Bank Street are people like myself who work and can't make a 10:30 appointment. And so that's one of the reasons why there haven't been as many people, I'm sure, attend the meeting. So I don't know if they can be, in the future, if this committee continues or discussions continue about this, which I hope they do, if perhaps there could be some evening hours
Thank you.
in addition to that. I also have another question, two more, and then I just have some statements. Did the committee look at the traffic studies that have been done on Bank Street by our police department? Because there have been at least a couple that I know of over the past year. So was the traffic impact studies looked at
I'm
by
going
the
to
committee?
defer back to the committee. I'm not sure if they looked
Yeah.
at those yet.
No, asking the committee.
Answer the question, no, we did not have opportunity to look at the impact study with regard to this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I would suggest that that be done before a decision be made to use the Bank Street Harbor Master property for parking. The other question I have for the committee, or maybe someone else can answer this, is how many parking spaces are there in that municipal parking lot and the TD Bank parking lot?
Municipal spaces in the Bank Street lot, is that?
No, in the municipal parking in the
oh,
port,
sorry, schoolhouse.
including the TD Bank area that was is used. Okay.
Startle you.
Thank you.
So the municipal is 87, and then the bank one between the Anchorage and TD Bank is 33.
Thank you.
So another thing that I don't know if the committee thought of this, but it might be something to consider before using the Bank Street property again, is their recommendation to have an hourly, a 2-hour or whatever limit at parking. Perhaps putting aside 30, because I guess it's 30 or 35 for employee parking, so maybe the TD that has 30 spaces. Putting those aside for the employee parking with a some sort of hanging tag in the car that's given to those people, obviously encouraging carpooling, but putting aside those parking spaces and have the other 80 used for the hourly rate, just, to see what the turnover is. That might be a nice way to start this year. The last question I have before I get into my comments is, can the town use a a lot such as the Bank Street property for parking for municipal parking or any type of parking without a change in the zoning. In other words, it's currently, that area is zoned for residential. Can a parking lot be put in a residentially zoned area without a change to the zoning?
Chris, do you have a?
Yeah, I would prefer to have a, talk to somebody just to make sure, but just to remind folks that it is currently a municipally owned lot, a municipally owned site, and we do have general parking that is there for public purposes for people to use the Harwich Conservation Trust property. So we would not be significantly altering the use of it.
Right.
But I will verify that with the town attorney if we proceed down that road.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think that's what you would need. You need to know that first, obviously, before you can make a decision to do that, because if it does violate the zoning bylaws or laws that we have, it would,
Right.
it would need to be changed. Okay, so now just a few comments. Thank you for your patience. Many people have mentioned the traffic. It is a very busy street, and obviously looking at those traffic impact studies is important. It's a residential street. I don't know if people understand that, or if the people on the committee know that opposite that lot, there is no sidewalk. The sidewalk, there are 3 places on Bank Street that have no sidewalk, and that is one area that does not have sidewalk. So it doesn't have a crosswalk, it doesn't have a sidewalk. So people that might be if there's not a shuttle bus, which I'm wondering where the money for that would come from, but that's another issue for the board to be looking at. If people are going to be parking there and crossing that street, they're going to cross to a shoulder. There's no, the sidewalk does not start till the house after our house, which is just a ways beyond. There are many people who walk and ride bicycles down that street, down Bank Street, so you're adding to that traffic as well. I am concerned about the noise. I wasn't really sure. I think it was in the packet that I read where the recommendation was for 3 times for the shuttle bus, for 3 times. I know the last time was at 4 o'clock. I'm assuming that's because the thought is that then people would be not using that municipal parking for beach parking, I guess, and there'd be more openings there for people who go out for dinner or for whatever. But if the employees of the businesses, particularly the restaurants that are open till 11, 12, 1 o'clock, park at that lot, and there's no shuttle bus that's going to run that late, which I'd hope there isn't going to be, that means that people are coming up either by bike or walking from the port to get to their cars. They're getting in their cars at 12, 1 o'clock, when those of us along that street are hopefully able to sleep. They're starting their cars, and they're driving out onto the street. Now, I haven't done, a sound type of test myself, but I have been in bed at 11, 12, 1 o'clock at night over the summer, and there is traffic that goes by. There are also people that walk up from the port, and just their conversation alone wakes us up. I can't imagine adding 35 or whatever number of cars that might come out of that parking lot, and it probably wouldn't be 35 at night, but there would be a number of them coming from the restaurants that close at 11, 12, or 1, and probably up until 2. Just think of the amount of noise that's going to make with car doors slamming, engines starting, and pulling out onto the street, never mind the people talking. So I'd like that to be considered as well.
Thank you.
I'm not really sure how, I just want to put in a plug for, I don't think that this can work without some sort of policing, whether it be volunteer or the police or whatever. I know that you mentioned about the recreation now. Maybe perhaps the two people that are involved would be checking for the violators in the municipal parking lot. Probably we would need somebody to police to make sure that people are using the Bank Street property properly if they're going to park there. So I think that's another thing to consider. We talked about the neighbors who did sign up to be on this committee, and I hope that if the committee continues, that at least one representative, because I do believe there is a representative from the Pleasant Street area that's on the committee. I hope that there would be one from the Bank Street area as well. I mentioned last year when we were discussing this at a selectmen's meeting, looking at different properties for shuttle bus, and one of them was the cultural center because of the parking. One of the things I also mentioned about that was that it would be a great opportunity to introduce people to the fact that we have a cultural center. If parking was, and there is parking available there, there's a lot of parking, that people who may not even know, whether they be employees or tourists, people that go into the beaches or the businesses in Harwichport, if they were to park there and get a shuttle there from that area, then maybe they'd go back and go in and visit the cultural center. I think that's an opportunity that shouldn't be overlooked either. The harbor, if you're talking about not using the harbor as a place to shuttle people, there again, it's bringing people to our brand new, beautiful harbor, the restaurant that's down there. You mentioned that it's because there's not a sidewalk that joins the harbor to the port. Well, if you're providing a shuttle bus, there's no need for that sidewalk, just as there is on Bank Street where there's no sidewalk in areas of Bank Street. So that's another place that I think should be looked at. I hadn't thought about the churches, but I bet there are a lot of places around town who have parking lots that would probably be worth looking at those too, particularly during certain days.
I'm just going to ask if you can finish up because there are...
Sure, I know, and you've been very patient. And the last thing I will just say is that I hope that we can continue this discussion through committee meetings that are available at a day and time, particularly time for more people, and that the selectmen will take all this into consideration tonight, not make a decision until all these issues are looked at and discussed with more of the neighbors that would be impacted by it. As one of the people that spoke earlier said, I view this as a short-term solution to a long-term problem, and maybe there's a way that we can look at solutions that might be more long-term. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think that, again, the board agrees that this is, this is the beginning. It's not a perfect solution, and we're just talking about the discussions from the committee. I also want to point out that we did look, we are very much interested in shuttles. We've been talking about that. The question is funding. We need to look at funding for that. We need to look at improving the sidewalks. As everybody has indicated tonight, we understand it's an issue. It's difficult to get the monies. And to Chris's point earlier this evening, all of you should be in touch with your legislators to say that we need a sidewalk that connects Harwichport to Saquatucket. Nobody can walk that safely. We don't have monies for a shuttle bus this year in the budget. Ed?
No. We need sidewalks that connect Saquatucket to Harwich. We also need sidewalks that connect the area of Dairy Queen over to Stop and Shop. I mean, sort of either side of Harwichport has no good pedestrian access.
Madam Chair, before I make another comment that I was speaking with the chair outside for a quick moment. Mr. Porter, who lives at the Anchorage, wants to say something too, and then I'm going to jump back. He has attended all of our meetings and has been a great resource as well. So then I'm going to jump back, and then I think what I'm going to say kind of can end everything.
Yeah, thank you.
Ralph Porter from 15 Pleasant Street in Harwich Port. I just wanted to comment on the parking at the Schoolhouse Road. It is a problem. We talked about it. I was given an opportunity to speak about it at one of the meetings. The fire and police came and had some comments about it too. Last summer was a disaster. It's just a pack of people trying to get in. Nobody knows where to go. There needs to be better signage. I really believe there needs to be something to limit how long people can park there. I think that's the big problem. And buses full of people come, and they go off to weddings and things and park their cars there. It's really a major problem. So I hope that in the process of doing this, we don't realize, or that we do realize, that the problem at Schoolhouse Road has not been solved. Also, unfortunately, the area that TD Bank so graciously worked to let the town use isn't being used as much as it should be. It doesn't have enough signage. People don't know it's there. It's hard. There are a couple of other driveways there, and people don't realize that that's what it's for. So something should be done about that. And the idea of having the employees park there is not a great one, because you're just not going to have that many more spaces for people that are coming to use the restaurants and stores. So I think, people have been working hard on this. I think there's an answer somewhere, but it certainly isn't soon. But we need to be sure that things start moving better in the center of town.
Thank you, and
Thank
thank
you.
you for participating with the committee.
So as I mentioned earlier, there has been someone that is interested in possibly helping with this scenario. What I'd like to do tonight is take everything that we as the committee have presented but also heard, and then once this individual comes forward with something, maybe bring it back, because some of the ideas that have come up, I think he could also help with, but again, not seeing what costs are going to be. We're all concerned about that as well. So I want to just thank all the residents who have come out, because it was great to have that interaction with everyone, and from the committee that is here too, because we heard that it was nice to have the back and forth and to hear some of also the town regulations that we weren't aware of. So thank you to all of you that have mentioned some of the things that we were unaware of at the times of our meetings. But there is a solution. There is a light at the end of the tunnel somewhere. We will all, as a community, figure it out so that everyone is happy with it.
Thank you,
So thank
Cindy,
you.
and thank you for all your hard work. Do you have something new that hasn't been said this evening? Because
Yes, I'll keep it short. I'm Mary DeBlois. I live on Bank Street. I'm a newer resident there. And I'm really glad this is being addressed, being new in town. It's such a super town, and I think this is really important, and we really need the town to be involved and to the appropriate amount of money to do this. I think it is short-sighted to go, and understanding the needs of the people on Pleasant Street and how difficult that is, because I've driven around there and seen it, but taking it from that residential area and shifting it up to us on Bank Street to another residential area is very short-sighted. I do agree off-site parking is an important thing, but I think you don't shift it within a residential neighborhoods. Take it someplace else where they can be, it's a little bit more off-site and it doesn't impact as much. I really appreciate the parking committee doing a multi-prong effect, signage, organizing the parking in town, lots of stuff going on. And again, off-site parking is good, but just don't shift it up there. I think be nice.
thank you. Don?
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's basically two things going on. There's the proposals that are in front of us and what it is we'd adopt or not adopt for this summer, but there's also the fact that the committee itself was set up to have an expiration date.
Right.
We have a whole bunch of committees that have just lingered through the years, so it was done deliberately to get to a beginning, a middle, and an end conclusion. We're not at that point yet. We can't do anything to actually take a vote tonight on this, but I suggest that we put this on the agenda to give it, that committee another year's worth of time to come up with some more durable solutions, which isn't to say that we're going to leave this without any consideration for what they've proposed, but the fact of the matter is that the next meeting for that committee is the last meeting for that committee unless we do re-up it.
Thank you, Don. Good evening,
To the
Chief.
board, in fairness to my brothers and sisters in blue, Chief Gilmet and his staff are very receptive to requests for traffic studies and enforcement. I've done it myself as the fire chief, and I live off of Bank Street, a road off of Bank Street, so I understand that. I like to walk it, my wife likes to walk and ride a bike. I'm concerned as well. I do sympathize greatly with the folks on Bank Street, and I'm glad that we no longer have a fire station there, because that was I think we were a bit of a nuisance to the community on Bank Street when we were there. But if you ask in the proper way, the police department will assist as they can with radar enforcement. The other thing that I notice in other communities that certainly catches my eye is permanent radar signs, traffic radar enforcement signs. And I think Barnstable is one. It grabs you, makes me think, I better take it down a little bit. And I think Bank Street would be an ideal place for a permanent a radar enforcement sign. But again, Chief Gilmet is extremely sensitive to the community's needs, and if the folks will reach out to him and his staff, I know for a fact that as they can, will up radar enforcement on Bank Street. The other issue I thought that was a very good one is the universal parking sign. The other spot that we do own, and at night, is Bank Street Beach. I mean, maybe employees could be encouraged to park on Bank Street Beach, because I too am concerned about foot traffic at any time of the day on Bank Street. But Bank Street Beach, and if the folks in this room and the folks at home would take your passion to, once again, say this, call your legislature, call Mass DOT, and get that sidewalk built to Saquatucket Harbor.
Right. Thank you, Chief. Okay, we're going to move on the agenda. We're not going to take an action, so.
If I can get just one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you again to the parking committee for the time that they spent on this, and also to the residents that came tonight to speak, and to tell you that we have heard your concerns. Bob, to your point, you are correct. It was a 7-member board, and somewhere there was confusion that it was 5 members, so we are missing 1 resident member and 1 business member. So I would ask that anyone that's interested go into the office, and I'm not making excuses for the office, but I would want to remind everyone, we've been operating with a very, very light staff in that office, half of what we normally operate with, and some things got missed. My apologies for that. Don and I are on the interview committee. We only interview what gets brought before us. So unless an application goes before us, we don't just go through the file and call people. So interviews are set up by the office, and we interview. I think the last point I'd like to make is, in my mind, walking in here tonight, this was just a proposal, and I think we gave this committee a very short window to try and solve a monumental problem. And we were looking for some suggestions, which we got, and then we got a lot more tonight from you all. And thanks again for that. Lastly, on the sale of the property, which was brought up, this board hasn't rediscussed selling or not selling the property. I'm still in favor of selling the property because that was the will of town meeting. For whatever the purpose was, looking at this proposal tonight and what they came up with, because it's not going to happen, it's not going to be sold before the summer. It was certainly an option before tonight, but we have to bring this back. But just so everyone's clear, it's not off the table to be sold, and this was not a predetermined disposition walking in here tonight that that's what we were going to do.
Chris?
I don't want to prolong this at all, but I just want people to know, I don't want people to be surprised that there is an article to do demolition. There are more raccoons in that building than there are people, so the building needs to come down. So that is an article, which I think just helps to alleviate the issue of having an eyesore in the neighborhood. But that is something that is in the budget to do the demolition of that building, and I don't think that that's a negative. It really gives us the opportunity to do more with it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming this evening. We appreciate your input.
We have a lot more vacancies too, just not this committee, so. As you look at the forms, there's a bunch.
New business, approval of the hire of Nicholas Donnelly as tractor-trailer driver per the request of the DPW director. Oh, I'll wait till, give him a minute to leave. If you could file out of the room so that we can continue the public meeting, thank you. Approval of the hire of Nicholas Donnelly as tractor-trailer driver per the request of the DPW director, effective April 22nd, 2019. Michael?
I move that we approve the hire of Nicholas Donnelly as tractor-trailer driver per the request of the DPW director, effective April 22nd, 2019.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yep.
Oh, Don.
Well, I just want to point out, Madam Chair, that this is a non-department head appointment, and I know Chris has said in the past that he kind of wants to short-circuit the probationary period to reject or accept. But just so the public knows, we're not actually confirming this appointment, we're just not objecting to it and moving forward with the appointment.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Under old business, Assistant Collector Treasurer regrade. Chris, do you want-
So, Madam Chair, there was two things on this. How much money would it cost? So there was a memo that was done, and when would it be effective? There was no funding. Carol Capola, the finance director, said there was no funding for this year to do it. So it would be effective on July 1 of 19, basically FY '20. And there is funding in the budget to do it, in the FY '20 budget. And that number of the increase is $2,661.14. That was the other question. So it is budgeted for in '20.
Thank you. Michael?
Chris, just if you could, on the regrades, didn't we, there was a lot of material involved in that? We were looking at what other towns were paying. Was that part of this regrade, or was it just a desk audit, internal desk audit?
This one, I believe, was more just a desk audit.
Michael?
I move that we approve the assistant collector treasurer regrade.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Confirmation of the appointment of Griffin Ryder as town engineer. Ed?
Madam Chair, I'd like to move approval of the confirmation, the appointment of Griffin Ryder as town engineer.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further, Don?
Just a quick update. This is a department head level position, and it does require 3 out of 5 votes to be confirmed.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Confirmation of the appointment of Patricia McCura as executive assistant to the town administrator.
Madam Chair,
Ed?
I'd move that we confirm the appointment of Patty McCura as executive assistant to the town administrator.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any
Again,
further
Madam Chair, this is
discussion?
not a department head. This is one of those, we're accepting the position absent a 4/5 rejection.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I just wanted to make a comment. They're both here in the audience, so maybe you could raise your hands. And, you know, we have been running short-staffed, so having help on the way is a godsend. So thank you for your opportunity.
Welcome and congrats.
Well, you've been taking notes all night, right?
Thank you.
Hawks Nest Road improvements, information for public hearing. Chris,
So,
yeah.
Madam Chair, my intent on this originally was, at the last meeting, there was a fair amount of confusion in terms of what the board was being requested and what the board was trying to do. I did take the opportunity to meet with the DPW director, as indicated, and I did include in the packet just something that could kind of show, if we were going to do a notice of what the work was, that I would put this, and if you want me to schedule a date and time. But really, the only thing I intended on trying to have done tonight was just to kind of let people know, here's what the work is that's being requested, here's what the board's going to consider, and to see if the board agrees to do it at the public hearing. So I just, where this was a somewhat of a controversial issue, I just wanted to make sure that the board was comfortable with the materials, but I was thinking about really the profile and the map would be what would be distributed, and then just the date and time of the public hearing.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Jerry?
Good evening, Jerry Beltis, Harriman Heath. Regarding Hawks Nest Road, on the previous meetings, there was Hawks Nest Road, Round Cove, and then Raptor. Are we discussing just the Hawks Nest Road tonight?
Yeah, this is only about the Hawks Nest Road public hearing.
Okay,
as
and
you
this
heard
is
Chris.
gathering for information. There's no decision going to be made tonight?
That's right, this is to decide about the information to go into the public hearing. Go
So,
ahead,
Madam
Chris.
Chair, we did, and it was in the package, it was 3 different requests. So Raptor Road was in there as a request. That has not been viewed as part of the public hearing. That was kind of, I think, what I had heard at the last meeting. The 2 requests that are being covered is really Seth Whitfield on the widening, that stretch, and then the second request was on the Round Cove Road extension.
Sorry, yes,
So
right.
those are the
Raptor
2
Road
that
was
would
out
be
of it, right.
part of it.
Okay, so Raptor is out of it, but
Is
the other
not
two,
part of this
other
public
2
hearing.
roads are open for discussion?
Correct.
Okay. Regarding Hawks Nest Road,
Hold on one second.
Again,
Chris?
this is not to do a public hearing on it tonight.
Right.
It's just, this is the material that will be distributed if the board's comfortable with it, and if it makes sense to the board that this is the request that's before it, so that way the neighbors will clearly understand what
Right.
the request is.
Yeah, we're not debating it tonight. This is
Oh,
just
oh.
about the public hearing that we're going to be scheduling.
okay, well, I'm not trying to debate it. I'm adding information or requesting information to be found for the hearing.
Okay?
Okay, so regarding Hawks Nest Road, supposedly it was given to the town, or the county abandoned it. In looking at town records, a road has to be accepted by the town at town meeting to be a town road. That has not been determined, that this is, in fact, been taken by the town or accepted at town meeting. So, that's one part of it. The other part I'll leave out because it's regarding the dense grade and that. On Round Cove Road, as far as paving that, that's something that would be talked about with Link, and in an area of critical concern, the 6 Pond area, if that goes forward, if they want to do any improvements down there, that would have to be brought up, as I believe, and maybe ask the county for impact of critical concern for an area that we take and now making a thoroughfare of Round Cove and Hawks Nest to Queen Anne through an area of critical concern. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Jerry. Michael?
If I may, just to take it off the table, because it was mentioned at the last meeting, the paving was a typo, and it's already been taken off the table. The request is to put T-base and level the roads, and to make Round Cove also as wide as a town road is supposed to be, and add T-base. No paving. So if we could just correct and make a note that we are not proposing, or that the applicant or the person asking us to fix the road is not asking for pavement.
No, it's T-base, but it's not just dirt, it's T-base.
No
It's not
pavement.
impervious.
That's all I'm saying.
Right,
It's impervious.
right. Okay,
No,
Maybe we'll put a description in of what it is.
no paving.
right, we understand it's not paving, it's
Clearly
T-base
we
though,
don't.
it's not just dirt to that point, so let's just clarify that even further. So why don't we have a?
Just part of the reason to have the map on here is it actually has a cross-section of what the road would look like. So it describes T-base. Not everyone's gonna know what T-base is
Right, so give it a
instinctively.
description,
So
yeah,
we'll
that would be,
include that
that'd be
description.
helpful, so, okay. So just to be clear though, you,
I know it's not a debate.
yeah, right, no, and it's also, this
Not
is just.
litigating at all.
This is just about what is going to be part of the public hearing, so I just want to be clear. Sorry?
Can I just give my opinion?
Well, that's really for the public hearing, so that's where you should voice those concerns. This is. No, and I appreciate that. What I'm saying is, this evening,
I just hope there is a public hearing.
that, right,
I live in
that's,
Helene Borges, I live on Brown Cove Road, and I hope there is a public hearing. I have to say that throughout this whole process, none of us have known what is going on. We have never been notified, no one has talked about it. I walked down there the other day, I could not believe how wide this road is already. I just hope there is a public hearing.
There will be a public hearing, and that's exactly what we're discussing right now. Hold on, Chris?
I was just saying, Madam Chair, since there are several people here tonight, if you want to schedule a date, I think we usually need about 3 weeks to get the newspaper
advertise.
article, yeah, to get the ad in, so if you want to schedule a date and time, that'd be fine.
Thank you, Chris. Don?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And further to what Chris had said, the reason that he has the documentation that he's got there is not to litigate it tonight. It's so that when it goes out, you'll be able to identify, and all the residents will be able to identify where it is and what it is to have that discussion. Because right now, it would be a very nebulous thing. We're going to have a public hearing. But the point is, in a public hearing notification, you've got to be able to say where it is and what you're planning on doing. So that's what this agenda item was for.
Right, so if you want to speak, you have to come up to the podium.
Okay.
Ed, did you have something?
Well, just a comment, if it takes 3 weeks for a public hearing,
It's a night of town meetings.
the third week from today would be presumably the second day of town meeting, or the first day of town meeting.
Has to be the week after.
So it would
Maybe
have
May
to be
13th?
May 13th.
Okay. So, yeah, 5/13. Well, so I'm just gonna say, we're talking about what's going in for the public hearing, so is there something particular that you want?
Well, they
And
keep
just identify yourself.
Robert Freitas, Hawks Nest Road.
Thank you.
Everyone keeps wondering if it's a town road. I mean, it's
Okay, so.
been in the Barnstable Registry of Deeds. I gave Chris a
Madam Chair,
copy
this
of
is
Yeah,
that.
you know, so
Just so he
I'm
knows.
just gonna call a point of order. I'm gonna ask you to sit down. This is not up for debate. We are literally identifying what we're doing for the public hearing. All of this is the proper arena for the public hearing of what you want to discuss now. We've already had extensive discussion on this, so I'm gonna refer you back to the public
Okay,
hearing.
well, I just wanted to point out,
Thank
Chris
you.
now
So
has
if
a
you,
copy.
so at this point, the discussion is for the public hearing. Anything more on this? Chris, you're gonna,
I'll do it for the 13th. If that's the,
do you need a vote on us going forward with that, or no?
I think by consensus, if the board's comfortable with the 13th.
Great, thank you.
Could I just ask one question?
Is it related to the public hearing?
Yes.
I'm Elizabeth Dubuque, 74 Hawks Nest Road. I'm just wondering, why is there a public hearing?
Because the board is.
We asked for one.
We asked for
You
a
asked
public
for,
hearing.
okay. I mean, just, is there normally public hearings to repair town roads?
Well,
That's
you,
part of the
that's
discussion.
part of the discussion, so we're not gonna get into that. That's gonna be part of the public hearing.
Okay, so there could be a, I just don't, and I don't mean to be, I don't want to sound like I'm being rude, but I just don't understand why there are public hearings and there aren't public
Well,
hearings.
I know
to-
I personally asked for a public hearing. I think you were here when I said I felt that way. I thought that should have been done several months ago. I
Okay,
asked
no,
for a
that's
public hearing.
fine. I was just curious why there are
So,
public
well,
hearings
if
in general.
The board wants to have a public hearing in that sense to get the abutters also aware of what's going on.
Okay.
It's a public notification.
Well,
Ed?
you know, we have had public hearings over road projects before.
Okay.
We had public hearings over the reconstruction of 137. We had public hearings over the installation of the traffic light at exit 10. We had public hearings, extensive public hearings over the reconstruction of 124, which didn't happen.
Right.
You
But those
know,
are all kind of major,
well,
roads.
these are all projects that were going to make a major difference in the existing roadway, as would what's being proposed.
Okay, thank
on
you.
Hawks Nest and Round Cove.
all right, that, I just
Thank you.
needed that answer. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to petition article number 54, plastic bottle ban, additional information.
Yeah.
This is,
This is better. This is, you know.
the proponents of the citizens petition seeks to make some changes to the motion and wanted to share that with the board.
No, we usually don't have
Good evening.
Yeah, hello, Madam Chair. I'm Patrick Otten. I was the originator of bringing the article to the town warrant as originally written. However, with discussion with town administrator, fire department, DPW, et cetera, there have been suggested changes. So what I'm here for tonight is to get your input, to hear what you think of the changes prior to presenting this at town meeting. So I've given you the handout. I can read it to you, or you can read it to yourselves, whatever you prefer. I guess because this is a
On TV, read it.
taped
Yeah.
TV, I'll read it. So the issues were to change the word dispensing to sale, and to change the word plastic containers with single-use plastic bottles. Also, to add a clause to address emergency and public safety operations, and also to add a time frame for implementation. So, from the original article, the change now reads, the procurement by the town of Harwich of either water or any other beverage in single-use plastic bottles of any size is prohibited. And the sale of water or any beverage in plastic containers is prohibited on town property. The additions is, any town department when engaged in public safety operations shall be exempt from this bylaw. The effective date, as soon as practical, but no later than January 1st, 2020.
Thank you. Do you want to elaborate any further, or do you want to, Chris, do you want to?
Well, maybe just to put a little bit of form and function, obviously the board cannot change a citizen's petition. So when people read the warrant article, they will see that it's for prohibit the towns of sale and also the dispensing. I believe what the proponent is trying to do here is to limit the scope a little bit to make it potentially a little bit more manageable for us to actually be able to implement. So it would be a reduction in the scope. The reduction in the scope is something that has to be done or has to be determined by the town moderator if it would be within the scope. So we will obviously share this with him prior to the meeting so we can get his feedback on it. The only other thing I believe, I'm trying to, the FinCom did have a discussion. This was one of their topics the other night. I do not believe they recommended to support this. So
They
just
did not.
The board is
They
aware.
8-0 voted to indefinitely suspend decision on this.
But just to, at least the board's aware of that they did have a fairly lengthy discussion, and they did decide to do indefinite postponement.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Any questions from the board or any further comments?
No, I think Chris has summarized his. It's your article, so.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
I know you changed one person. I hid my metal bottle under the table.
But I
okay.
would, let me just comment though. I appreciate you talking to the safety departments, because that's really the critical ones that they're comfortable with. You know,
Right.
if you can get that through, then I think it's,
Yeah, so both fire department and DPW are satisfied with these changes.
That's great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
So I guess, we're making a monumental leap from where we are. Right?
Yeah.
We're asking for a monumental leap. I guess I would ask, have you given any thought, and the group given any thought to how we're, as a town, how we're gonna police this? That would be my first question.
Right, so it's a bylaw for the municipality. So how is any bylaw of the municipality enforced? In this case, I think it's pretty simple. It's self-regulating. So the town's aware of the bylaw. Mr. Clark is aware of it. He has already suggested some possible solutions where the need for plastic bottles is eliminated. So I think it's a self-repairing situation. We take the first steps and initiate it, increase our consciousness, and then we all begin to fall into line and adapt new behavior towards this problem.
So I guess, Chris, and we haven't seen anything from administration yet or department heads on this until tonight. What solutions What solutions have you come up with, and how are we gonna deal with the new snack shack at Sacotucket Harbor, and how are we gonna deal with the vendors at Bank Street that we've already negotiated a contract for through this season?
Yeah, actually, again, this is a citizen's petition, so if it passes, then and the town has a legal obligation to try to comply with it. So in the light of that, we did ask to have a delay. As you point out, we have different, this is really, because it's the town only and the point of sale, that it really goes to where do we have in-town buildings, where are we selling bottled water and plastic bottles. So we do at the community center have machines that dispense to the general public, so those machines would have to be changed out or not change out the machines, but change out the content in the machines. And then really the second location would be for the different events. And we could ask the vendors, I've had at least a preliminary discussion with Eric Beebe, that the vendors that we have that sell materials, what would be their alternative to not have to do it in plastic containers. So we've done initial work to see if there was a mechanism. And the one suggestion that I did make, and really just as a suggestion, it would take putting it into the capital budget, that as we change out bathrooms at the beaches, we have in Town Hall, we've been doing this internally, putting in the water bottle filling stations and see if there was a means to change the kind of the way, if you have the ability to have water on sites where currently we don't, then perhaps people would think to bring their own bottles and then they could fill it at those locations. So more concepts of how we would try to comply with this than necessarily a full action plan.
We don't have to worry about the school, though, the schools, right? Because technically,
Technically, they're a different municipal entity.
right.
This says Town of Harwich.
Thank you. Jerry?
I don't have a horse in this race, but I'm just thinking about the bike paths. How does that affect the bike paths? There's one that's town-owned, and then there's the state-owned, so I don't know if that works or not. It's just a
Well, this is not about.
By eliminating the word dispensing, it's
Right.
only the point of sale.
Sale.
So in terms of the point of sale for the town, really the point of sale is the vending machine and any of the vendors. Potentially, the Cranberry Festival and different vendors that are on there, we'd have to also give some thought to how that would be administered, hence the request for the delay.
Right. Thank you.
Well,
Sorry, Ed.
as being involved in the Cranberry Festival, I've looked at this and sort of looked at the amount of public support that I think this has in our town and other towns, and I would imagine, I'm not sure what towns it will pass in, but it will pass in at least some, and will have a ripple effect through all of those sorts of summer events and activities that, similar to the Cranberry Festival's activities with our vendors that come in. So I've been seriously looking into alternatives, what the alternatives are, and I'm finding some. I'm not finding great alternatives, but passable alternatives. You can get water in boxes, sort of like milk carton boxes. You can get canned water. Unfortunately, the closest distributor that I found of canned still water is in Minnesota, and it costs about twice as much to ship it here as it does to buy it. So it's sort of prohibitive at this point till we can get a local bottler to start canning it. But on the other hand, there are, seltzers and club sodas and other carbonated waters that would be available in cans that are readily available and at a reasonable price for vendors to make, be able to make their nut on participating as a food vendor at stores. One of the problems the Cranberry Festival is going to have is with our beer sales at the Cran Jam, we serve those in plastic cups. We're going to have to come up with, find a vendor of paper cups. Well, I remember growing up in San Francisco, going to the San Francisco Giants game. The beer vendors all came around with cases of bottles. They'd pop the bottle and pour it in a paper cup, and nobody seemed to have a problem drinking it. So I'm certain we can find huh?
This doesn't cover that. Bottles.
Well,
Plastic containers, any beverage in plastic containers.
Yeah, so.
Your proposed change, though, is for single-use plastic bottles.
Well,
But there's some of those beer bottles.
but you know, if they've, town meeting has voted to eliminate the single-use plastic bottles, I'm gonna try and eliminate the single-use plastic cups. Because they're actually more of a litter problem than the plastic bottles are. So, yeah.
Bonnie Bridges, Curl Road. Mr. McManus, don't you think that as more towns, more demand,
Yep.
the cost will come down?
Sure.
And people will
will.
get used to it, so it's,
Yeah, it will, certainly. But, you know, as somebody who's, you know, especially in September, going to have somewhere around 10,000 people arrive, I'm looking for whatever options I can now to make sure I can put them in place if it does pass.
and possibly even with signs up saying, we do not sell
Yep.
single-use plastic bottles.
Right, and again, we have the flexibility to go to January 1st,
Sure.
2020.
Yep.
So worst-case scenario, if you couldn't, you'd have
If
that.
we couldn't, but, you know, if this does pass, I'll try and implement it at this year's festival.
Thank you.
With both the festival's activity and our food vendors' activities.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you very much.
John?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael's right, though. The Snack Shack is us. It's municipal property, and frankly, I see them pouring into plastic cups. The only thing I will say, and I'll say this in support of this endeavor, is we got a real problem. I mean, there's microorganisms now that they're noting decomposed plastic in, and those get eaten by other organisms that are bigger, and they therefore become contaminated with it. And this is ridiculous. When I grew up, people had coolers and they had paper cups, and somewhere or another, we got to come up with some way of stopping this or slowing this down. The plastic cups have more plastic in them than the plastic bottles because they've been engineering those thinner through the last several years. So the cups have much more plastic, and when the elastomers dry out, the plastic becomes brittle and it just goes all over the place.
I mean, a lot of places like, even like Burger King or McDonald's have those paper cups.
Yeah.
You know, so.
So, Ed, for your point, one contact that is yet to get back to me is Health Department on what are the concerns of dispensing from, say, a water cooler or an igloo cooler water into a paper. So we're still waiting to hear. Maybe you can prompt to get that.
To that point, Madam Chair, actually, I had the health director in my office this afternoon. We had some discussions. It's a little bit more problematic with the pictures and stuff. I would encourage you just to schedule a time to meet with her. And you could just go to their office and schedule a time to meet with her.
Really, we're not changing anything except the vessel, the final cup.
It wasn't so much, it was just more, how do you do it safely in the sanitary code? And it's, you know, things sometimes look simple on the surface, and there's a little bit more complexity to things.
Where the festival I'm putting together their application to operate a temporary food service location, and one of the questions that's going to be proposed is how to set up a large thermos dispenser for water. So
So thank you for
All
all
right.
your efforts
No,
on this.
no.
We appreciate it.
And thank you for hearing me again.
No problem. Thanks for coming again.
Come as much as you want, as long as you bring the dog.
Yeah, yeah. You could leave him. Do you want to leave him?
Just keep him,
Just
keep
to
him
that
open.
He's
point,
more well-behaved
I
than most
just-
of our audiences.
People are probably somewhat surprised that there's a dog here. We have in every single posting that there's reasonable accommodation that the town administrator is supposed to make. So we did have a discussion, and the dog is here for a reasonable accommodation purpose. So just if people at home, and I did have one, which I think I shared with the board, that some folks said they were allergic to dogs,
Right.
please let me know, and we'll do the best we can to make reasonable accommodation for everyone, so everyone can participate. Thank you for the opportunity to
Thank
do
you.
the ad.
Okay, so do you want to take it?
So, Madam Chair, I have, and I'll keep it brief. I did have Bob Lawton in the office, took a stab at, on the retiree health insurance, just so folks are aware at home. We do offer health insurance to active employees. When employees retire, they can carry that into retirement. There was a concern, and this is a valid concern, so the board was requested, I think, a year ago to make a change to this, or maybe even 2 years ago, that when you retire, you have to kind of declare within a year when you want to take health insurance, whether you want to take health insurance or not. And it has come back, and I personally just kind of agree with this, that it does make some sense, that if you have people, generally fire, police tend to retire a little bit earlier. We have a mandatory element that when you hit 65, you have to go on to Medicare, so it's not as much of an issue, but when you can retire at 55, there is that need to bridge to 65. And in this case, we would hate to have employees sign up for it so they don't lose the benefit, and we have to pay 75% of that cost, but not have them take advantage of that benefit until they hit 65. So in here, and really, Bob took a stab at putting together some language. So within that 1 year, if an employee is going to be on a spouse's plan for a period of up to 5 years, could they then put that basically on hiatus for up to 5 years, and then when they're ready to come back on, they could come back on to the town's health insurance. If the board's comfortable with that, I think last time when we made this change originally, I don't know if we did a public hearing necessarily, but we definitely made it more public to get input from the retired employees. So if the board's comfortable with that, I could schedule something and put that on for a future meeting date to make that amendment. But it's no need to have somebody on a plan for 5 years if they're not intending on using it. Originally, the concern was if you had 5 or 6 people doing that in any 1 year and automatically coming back on, it makes it challenging to budget.
Ed?
Well, I think the proposal that Bob's crafted does 2 things. It potentially saves the town money, and it treats our retiring employees fairly, and I don't see why we would not want to consider adopting that.
I agree. Sometimes there's unintended consequences from certain actions, so we were trying to fix one issue, and we essentially created potentially another one. The other, I did put in on the application materials for the Safe Route to Schools, I put in some of the material. We didn't submit this ourselves, so I will kind of circle back, because it does look like we're going to get that grant, and I'll get a more complete copy and put that in for the board's package. So trying to do what I can do to get that information. We will dig it up, because we do anticipate getting a contract from the state, so that will be something that the board will have to actually engage the contract.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to say it again, though, we get kind of drawn in as if we were getting reeled in as fish on these things. We get the blank statement that we're going to do something that's commendable, and then we pursue it, subject to some other hearing or anything, and then the next thing you know, we're committed to it. I'm just saying, once again, it may be the school's application, but it's our sidewalks, and it's yet to be proven to us by anything factual that the 5-foot sidewalks are possible even throughout this entire route. So before we actually commit ourselves to, taking the money and entering into a signed contract, we really need to know what's possible and what's not possible. Because I for one, will never vote for signing the contract without knowing what that contract entails and whether it's even doable in the real world.
I think to that point,
Let me just, because my question may be, you may be about to answer my question. My question is, taking a step back from what Don's point is, if I read the article, at least in the paper correctly, with 670, whatever value was, amount to be determined by what actually our plan was to be submitted. Who, in fact, is developing that plan? Is that our town engineer? Is that
well,
because that would answer Don's questions too? Because if we know who's going to develop the plan, we
Also
have
wanna
a
see the
plan going
plan.
forward. Well, but it looks like it's part of the process. We now have to submit. My question is, who's developing the plan, and what's the time schedule for that?
yeah, the plan originally, the estimating was done by DPW. We did get input from the county commission, their traffic resource people. I presume, and maybe I shouldn't presume, but I presume that generally, just for folks at home, I mean, a public way could be as much as 40 to 50 feet wide. You drive down the road itself is only 22 feet generally wide. So on those shoulders, is there sufficient space to put the sidewalk in? I presume that DPW and the commission did some of that legwork, but I'll go and get that confirmed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd rather not presume, because, I mean, I've driven and walked that whole area, the area where Reds is the buildings
The hell you
abut the
say?
sidewalk, right at the curb line, there's parking.
I hate to give up
You
pink.
gotta be able to, and that's not 5 foot wide, so you gotta be able to figure out where to put that 5 feet, whether you're gonna cheat into the roadway or actually going into somebody's building. Somebody's gotta show me that this is plausible.
We'll get
Because
it.
in writing, this all looks great. I'd love to have safe sidewalks. I'm sure everybody would, but what does that really mean in terms of what we're obligating ourselves to do? And again, the town has way too much of a history of, trust us, we'll do this and we'll figure out the details later. Before we actually physically commit to saying, yeah, we're taking the money, we need to see this.
Okay. I just want to remind people, this is a grant that is designed to improve sidewalk network in town. We had a lengthy discussion earlier this evening about the need for money to do sidewalk improvements. The concept is good. We'll get to make sure we get the details right.
And again, I'm gonna say that Paul Lag originally brought this to the town probably a year ago on a different area, and Paul is a planner, so he's aware of the different stipulations involved in these grants.
And then just the last, I thought I would end on on kind of a nice note. It's been a while since I've got a letter, so I thought I would. Bob Lawton had put together, we received a voicemail from Mr. Robert Wojciechowski regarding excellent service that he received from one of folks in the tax department, so specifically Amy Bullock, Susan Kerr, and Elaine Zaida. Elaine works in our assessing department, and just wanted to pass along to you and to compliment you guys on the job that they did. That was well done. He felt that they went above and beyond the normal requests, and just wanted to make sure the town administration, through me, the Board of Selectmen, know that, there are people that come in and have issues with taxes and issues with their property, and we do try, certainly as an administrator, I try to make sure that we do a good job for people and act in a professional way, so it's nice to have some acknowledgement to that end. That concludes my report this evening, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chris, and it is nice to hear positive feedback. Don?
For the record, I did not run in the marathon, or I'd still be out there. That's it.
Thank you. Ed?
I believe it's the weekend after this is the Tour de Trash, and I'd encourage everybody to make plans ahead to participate in it. I've been driving up and down Cape more than normal, and our town, I think, looks good. It could use some work, but there are some towns that really don't look very good at all.
Thank you, Ed. Michael?
I had nothing.
Larry?
Just a quick comment. I think a couple meetings ago, we had a couple eighth graders make a presentation. Did a fantastic job. Last week, another couple of, and I commented at the meeting, made a presentation, another issue at the Board of Health, and also very impressive. I was sitting next to a fellow in the audience who's from Chatham. Another pair of eighth graders made a presentation there for a cause, and also an excellent job. So sometimes it's good to recognize the great jobs our schools are doing, but they're very impressive presentations.
Nice. And on the school note, I got the opportunity to participate, volunteer through our company, Pohina Sevi de Silva, with Harwich Elementary. They had a schoolyard natural habitat grant that they received, and so our group went in and made the birdhouses with them on one day and painted, and the next day, or 2 days later, we went in and put the birdhouses on posts outside. The kids helped with the cement and everything. It was a great day, so it was fun. Nice to be with the kids and volunteering. I just also want to recognize that Cindy told us again, a reminder this evening, about the Toast of Harwich for 4/26. The tickets are available on the Chamber's website. Art Week coming up 4/26 to 5/5. Your Cranberry Festival concert on 4/27.
4/27.
Resurrection. Oak Project.
Oak Project.
So a lot
huh?
of things going on in town, and hopefully people will get involved. And of course, to your point, Michael, we always need volunteers. We need an alternate on the ZBA, and we need other people. And I don't know all the vacancies, but it's always an issue. So
Check the
can I get a
site.
motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned.